the action, the coordination. And then coupled with the camaraderie that we've already felt, we haven't been together very long, but already there's a real closeness in the group. You know, after months of training together, how much closer would we be? And is that the reason my grandfather came back? He came back for his friends.
When it ended, I really started thinking about my grandfather as if he had just died or something. And thinking about how much it was an experience for him and how it's kind of still in me somehow.
Greg Kelly is the great-grandson of Canon Frederick Scott, chaplain of the 1st Canadian Division. The Reverend Scott appears to have been a popular, even legendary figure in Canada's Army. Scott led services in this ancient church.
He doesn't look at all the negative things, how everything's so dark and gloomy. He'll say, well, yeah, I'm walking through all this mud, but then there's a bird chirping. There's some buds coming out, and you can see the beauty of nature that will, arise after this hellhole is done with.
Are you finding yourself there, son? Got the spirit? God be with you.
He was an intelligent, sensitive man. He came here to talk. I think the key word is talk, not just preach at the men. They were expecting to be told about prayer and not sinning and all the things that priests should talk about, but he'd talk about life and talk about just being a decent human being. And they knew he was serious because he was a perfect example. Scott, the perfect officer, who never ate before the men ate, never went to bed until the last man had been bedded down in a dry cot, sometimes found kneeling next to a parapet or a sandbag in the trenches, wet, trying to sleep lest than take away a soldier's dry cot. He was a role model that inspired them, thinking perhaps there was something good about man after all. By God, there had to have been something better than the death that was facing them in those trenches. And when you're tired and heartsick and broken, God will do.
He was older too, he was 54, so he literally a father-like figure. He could just talk to you about life. Any concerns you had, he could talk to you. He would keep it off record, so if the guys had to spill their guts, Canon Scott was there to listen.
Can you imagine, in the middle of all this mess, you've got this one guy who's offering you nothing but human decency. And that's what it comes down to, is this is what you're dealing with every day, and a man comes up to you and says, well, here's a cigarette, and here's a piece of chocolate, and I'll listen to what you have to say, and I'll try to help.
This film is about war, but it's also a love story, the story of Papineau and the love of country that drove him to war. It's the story of him falling in love with a woman he has never met. It was a custom to give soldiers someone to write back home, a stranger they could pour out their feelings to. Papineau is given the name of Beatrice Fox, a 25-year-old Philadelphia sculptress.
Dear Miss Fox, you will be surprised to receive this letter. If I am a little obscure or erratic, you must forgive me, as I am in a dugout within 100 yards of the Boche, and they send an occasional rifle grenade or whiz-bang in my direction. Since August, I have been a licensed killer. Since January, I have tried to kill. I have succeeded in not being killed, at any rate. Out of 40 officers, I am the only one neither killed, nor wounded, nor sick. Rather a record of good fortune, but a record which may be broken this evening, or in 10 minutes for all I know. Living on such volcanoes destroys my sense of decorum. I should sleep, but the fresh adventure of writing to an unknown rather appealed to me. Would you forbid me the appeal and deny a poor soldier?
In August 1914, the Germans started war on the Western Front by invading Belgium and France. To aid their allies, the English army, bolstered by a Canadian battalion, arrived in France just in time to help stop the Germans capturing Paris. Now both sides couldn't budge the other, so they all dug in, constructing a trench line stretching from Switzerland 500 miles north to the English Channel. Canada's war started in Flemish Belgium, in Flanders Fields. St. Julien, Belgium, the 22nd of April, 1915.
And this is what the Canadians see here, you know, they're in the rear areas playing a game of football, knocking it around. But suddenly, you imagine, someone hears something, you know, boom, what the hell is that? Boom, boom, boom. And you see in the far distance this suspicious yellow cloud, and it doesn't look right. Your sixth sense tells you this is not good. Well, what could it be? You're trying to dismiss it, and it's getting closer.
The Canadians are about to be attacked by a weapon of mass destruction, poison gas. The Germans have been waiting for weeks for the right winds. Now they have come.
Remember, chlorine hugs the ground. It's particularly menacing. It's heavier than air, so it creeps along the ground, wafted by the winds. It's just coming ominously closer to you.
George Muggleton's great-grandfather fought through the gas attack.
In my diaries, my grandpa said they were back and they smelled a strange smell, and they thought it was lyddite shells. It was just kind of had that funny smell in it, but they weren't sure what was going on.
Look for the enemy! How's the horn? Enemy inside! All rounds, independence! Rapid! Fire!
The boys quickly stood to and fought. Now, some say it was the VC winner, Captain Scrimger, or it could have been a group of people who took chemistry at McGill or elsewhere, who remembered that this may be chlorine gas, and when it hits wet cloth, chemically it'll turn into crystals.
This on your handkerchief! This on your handkerchief! This on your handkerchief!
Some officers screaming at you, piss on your handkerchief, piss on your handkerchief, and you give yourself the man's gone mad. Imagine, there you are, trying to reach for your rifle, which may be a Ross rifle, which may be suddenly jammed just when you're trying to reload.
In the fog of war, reports of what is happening here are filled with confusion. To find out for himself, Greg Kelly's great-grandfather gets on his horse and heads for the front. The first hint to Canon Scott comes from a runner.
Soldier? Sir, they're using gas.
To avoid panicking the oncoming reinforcements, Canon Scott makes the soldiers swear an oath.
Those boys are going to the battlefield anyway. I want you to promise me that you will not say a word. Do you promise me?
I promise, sir. Where are we going, sir?
Depends on what kind of lives we've lived, boys.
Braking and running is not an unusual or unnatural reaction. Braking and running in front of that and gas, where you have no defenses, is perfectly normal. You'd expect that. The Canadians don't. In other words, the boys quickly stood to and fought. Standing in the blood and vomit, holding wet handkerchiefs to their mouths, they fought and totally shocked the Germans, because it was the last thing they expected. You know, a line that held, a line that fought, a line that was even prepared to counterattack right in this area.
is a battlefield surgeon